All right, so greenwashing.
Yep.
You sent over this document, Superficial Sustainability, and it seems like every company wants to say they're eco-friendly these days,
Yeah.
even if it's
It's a minefield out there.
it really is.
I mean, this excerpt you shared really, it gets into how companies, try to kind of pull the wool over our eyes.
Yeah, it's like they're playing green bingo. Like
Yeah.
they can check off a few boxes, maybe change a light bulb here or there, plant a tree, and all of a sudden it's like, look at us, we're eco champions.
Right, right.
But this document's saying that's just the tip of the iceberg.
Exactly. It actually points out, I think, 8 different common pitfalls that companies fall into.
Okay.
And one that we see pretty often is this focus on those, what they call, easy wins.
Mm.
So, they'll talk about how they've switched to LED light bulbs,
Right.
but they're, maybe not addressing the fact that their overseas factories have massive water consumption issues.
So it's like someone bragging about their reusable coffee cup, but then you find out they drive a gas guzzler every day.
Exactly. It's like creating an illusion of sustainability without actually addressing the bigger issues.
It's amazing how those small things can distract us, right? Like, we want to feel good about supporting a company that's making an effort,
Right.
even if it's a small effort.
And that's what makes it so effective. I
Yeah.
mean, it plays on our emotions and that desire to do good. So we don't really look at the bigger picture of their environmental impact.
It makes you wonder, how much of our eco-friendly shopping is actually based on these, stories they're telling rather than our actual real sustainability.
That's the question, isn't it? And it leads us to another one of these pitfalls that the excerpt talks about, which is these vague claims that, companies love to use. Everything's eco-friendly. Everything's all natural.
Right, right. Like, it reminds me of this natural cleaning product I bought. And, I'm feeling very virtuous about my purchase. And then I flip it over and it's like a hazmat warning label.
Right.
So, I mean, how do we even cut through all those buzzwords to figure out what's actually,
Well, the excerpt suggests becoming kind of like a sustainability detective.
Right.
Right. Like we've got to look beyond those buzzwords and demand specifics. Like, for example, if a brand says they use, recycled materials, what percentage of their product is actually using them?
Right.
And what about the environmental impact of their recycling process itself?
It's kind of like, I don't know, it can feel a little bit like you're bursting someone's bubble. You know what I mean? Like when you start really questioning and you're excited about a company and what they're doing,
Of course. But remember, it's not about shaming companies or anything. It's really about, pushing for that transparency
Right.
and holding them accountable for the promises they're making. Because ultimately, if you just have these vague claims, it kind of erodes trust.
Yeah.
And it hinders any real progress.
Okay. Speaking of sneaky, this excerpt also mentions, hidden trade-offs,
Right.
which feels relevant in, the world today.
Oh, for sure. It's that thing where companies will, highlight one environmental benefit, but kind of sweep any negative impacts under the rug.
Right.
The example they use is electric cars. So on the surface, they're, marketed as the kind of eco-friendly alternative to gas guzzlers.
Right. Which, to be fair, is a step in the right direction.
It is.
Yeah.
But what a lot of people don't realize is that the mining practices, for those car batteries,
Yeah.
they come with their own set of ethical and environmental problems.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So that's a classic hidden trade-off.
It's like they're saying, look at this amazing sustainable product, but not really mentioning what went into it.
Exactly. It's like they're hoping that by focusing on that one green aspect, you won't even notice the other details.
Wow.
And it's effective, right?
Yeah.
Because we want simple solutions to these complicated problems. It's like this sustainability shell game where we're trying to follow the P.
That's a good way to put it. So then how do we become better sustainability detectives? I mean, we've got all these eco claims coming at us from every direction.
Yeah.
You mentioned lack of a holistic approach. What does that even mean?
So think about it this way. Imagine a fashion brand, right?
Okay.
And they're really big on using organic cotton.
Okay.
They've got the certifications, everything.
Sounds good.
Right. But then you dig a little deeper.
Okay.
And you find out that, they're all about fast fashion.
Yeah.
They're churning out tons of clothes that end up in landfills.
Yeah.
And their labor practices are questionable at best.
So even if they're doing something positive, it's completely overshadowed by all these other practices.
Exactly. They're not looking at the whole picture.
Right.
Sustainability can't be like a Band-Aid on one aspect of your business. It's
Right.
got to be holistic. You've got to consider the entire life cycle of the product and its impact.
It's like they're missing the forest for the trees,
Right.
focusing on one tiny little sapling when really it's about the entire ecosystem.
Exactly.
So how do we even assess that? Whether a company's like truly taking that approach, what are we even looking for? It's like they're saying, look, our kitchen's spotless, but all the garbage is just shoved in a closet somewhere.
Right, exactly. True sustainability, it's about
Yeah.
the whole system, not just, this
Yeah.
pretty little picture.
Yeah.
So how do we know the difference? Well, this document, it says we've got to go beyond just these individual things companies say they're doing, right?
Right.
Like, look at their whole track record.
Okay.
Have they said publicly they're going to, like, cut back on emissions or waste?
Mm-hmm.
What about their policies on things like deforestation or, making sure they get materials ethically?
Yeah.
These are the questions we should be asking.
So it's like checking their references. They can say whatever they want, but what have they actually done, right?
Exactly. And speaking of track records, this short-term thinking, it's another big red flag, according to this excerpt.
Okay, so instead of really changing things for good, they're just looking for that quick, like, PR win.
Yeah, exactly. And a good example is when companies make a big deal about one single thing. Maybe they sponsor a beach cleanup or they give a tiny bit of their profits to, like, an environmental group.
Yeah, which, I mean, on the surface, that sounds good.
It does.
Yeah.
But the problem is, often it's just a cover.
Okay.
They want good headlines, and then it's back to business as usual.
So it's like putting, like, a tiny Band-Aid on a huge problem.
Exactly. They're not dealing with the root cause.
Right.
So we've got to look for that commitment to long-term change. Are they actually investing in renewable energy? Are they doing that circular economy stuff?
Right.
That's how you know they're serious.
It's the difference between, like, a company tweeting about Earth Day versus, like, actually changing their whole process, their whole supply chain.
Exactly. And that brings us to another important piece of this whole picture. Transparency. This document calls out selective disclosure.
Oh, so they're, like, cherry-picking what they want us to see.
Exactly. So maybe they brag about one sustainable product line, but it's like 1% of what they actually do.
Right. Right.
Or they'll talk about lowering emissions in one place, but ignore that they've actually gone up somewhere else.
Oh, wow. So how do we, like, as consumers, encourage companies to be more transparent?
We got to demand it.
Okay.
Don't be afraid to ask those tough questions.
Yeah.
Look for the companies that are open about their impact, both the good and the bad.
Yeah.
Because real sustainability, it's not about being perfect. It's about making progress.
And be honest about the challenges.
Exactly. And, even with the best intentions, there are going to be hurdles.
Right?
But the problem is when companies try to hide that or pretend everything's perfect,
Yeah.
when they're transparent, that builds trust and pushes everyone to do better.
It's a journey. Speaking of journeys, this document, it mentions symbolic gestures. What does that mean?
Yeah. So this is about those things companies do that look good, but don't really do much.
Okay.
Like, think about those one-time beach cleanups or giving a tiny bit of money to a cause after, like, big oil spill.
Right, right.
It's more about looking good than actually doing good.
It's giving, like, performative environmentalism.
Yeah, exactly. And honestly, it often works because people want easy answers.
Right.
We want to believe these little things make a difference, but really they're just distracting us from the real problems.
So how do we know then if a company is taking real action versus just these gestures?
It goes back to what we were talking about. Look at their track record.
Yeah.
What are they committed to long term? Are they putting money into renewable energy? That's circular economy stuff. Those are signs they mean business.
Okay.
And importantly, are they pushing for bigger change, beyond just their own company?
Yeah.
Because real sustainability, it's not just one company's job.
That's got to be everyone.
Exactly. It's about governments, businesses, individuals, all working together.
So we've got to move beyond just these feel-good things and actually tackle the root of the problem.
Yes, exactly. We need a different way of thinking, one that's in it for the long haul.
Okay, so we've talked about being specific, that holistic approach, thinking long-term, being transparent, and looking beyond those gestures. This excerpt also mentions misuse of certifications. What's that all about?
So certifications, they can be really good, right?
Right.
In theory, they help us quickly see what's what.
Like if you see fair trade or organic, you kind of breathe a sigh of relief. Right.
Exactly. But unfortunately, some companies, they take advantage of that trust. They create their own eco-labels, and they're often really vague.
So they're like, this is our own made-up good housekeeping seal of approval, but it doesn't really mean anything.
Exactly. They know people want that reassurance, so they make their own to cash in on it.
It's like printing your own money and hoping people just accept it. So how do we make sure we're not being fooled, especially with all these different labels?
You got to be a savvy shopper. If you don't know a certification, look into it.
So we basically have to become sustainability detectives, right? Like instead of dust for fingerprints, we're checking labels.
Exactly. A little bit of healthy skepticism can go a long way.
Right.
Look into who's behind that certification, what their rules are, how hard is it to actually get that label.
Yeah.
A real certification is going to have, strict standards. Someone's checking to make sure it's all legit.
Dude, transparency is key. Okay, we've got to watch out for those self-made eco labels and really do our research. This document also mentions, like, looking at a company's whole supply chain. Why is that so important?
Because a company might look really good on the surface, but behind the scenes, they could be involved with some shady stuff.
Okay.
Like, imagine they get their materials from suppliers who are, destroying forests or exploiting workers.
Right.
Even if the company itself seems okay, they're still part of a system that's hurting the planet.
So it's like you think you're buying a conflict-free diamond, and then you find out the mine it came from has terrible conditions. It's like the end product might seem fine, but the process to get there wasn't.
Exactly. It's about the whole journey of a product. Where did the materials come from?
Yeah.
How is it made?
Yeah.
How does it get to us? What happens when we're done with it? All of that matters.
So it's not enough to just be like, oh, this looks good on the shelf.
Nope. We had to think bigger. Like, where was this made? Who made it? What was the impact of making it?
But how do we even find that out? It's not like companies are, like, shouting that stuff from the rooftops if it's bad.
You're right. It can be tough.
Mm.
But that's where we as consumers have to speak up.
Okay.
The more we demand that transparency from companies, the more they'll have to listen. And luckily, there are some resources out there that can help us make smarter choices.
Like what? Tell me more.
So there are these organizations that basically they grade companies on how sustainable they are.
Okay.
They look at, their environmental impact, how they treat their workers, stuff like that.
Oh, that's interesting. So it's like a sustainability report card for businesses.
Exactly. And these reports, they can be really helpful because you're getting an unbiased view. Plus, don't underestimate good old-fashioned research.
Right.
Websites, even social media. That's where you can find out, like, what's their supply chain like? What are they really committed to? Have they been involved in any, like, controversies?
So it's about being, like, proactive and not just taking their word for it.
Exactly. We've got to be a little skeptical, right?
Yeah.
If something sounds too good to be true, it probably is. So dig deeper. Ask those tough questions. Our choices as consumers, they have power.
Yeah, they do.
We can either support a better future, or we can keep supporting the same old system that puts profit before everything else.
It sounds like, learning to spot greenwashing, that's just the first step.
Yeah.
Then it's about using what we know to create real change.
Exactly. And the more we know as consumers, the better choices we can make.
This has been amazing. Thank you so much for all of this. So for everyone listening, ready to be sustainability detectives, what's one thing they should take away from all this?
Remember, every time you buy something, you're supporting a company and their values. So choose wisely. Look for companies that are doing things right and aren't afraid to show you how. And if they mess up, let them know. Every little bit makes a difference.
I love that. That's all the time we have for today's deep dive into greenwashing. We hope you feel, a little more equipped to spot those misleading claims and make choices that align with your values. Remember, knowledge is power. Until next time, stay curious, and thanks for joining us on the deep dive.